Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Corporate Underground. This session, we have a guest, and our guest, Julie Green, is here. Hi, Julie. Julie has had a very successful executive career in infrastructure, transport, and healthcare, delivering major change agendas in the public and private sectors. She's super passionate, as I've experienced, about sustainable development and contributing to a better world by tackling climate change, and is the non-executive director of Greening Australia, who have just recently raised. So this week's topic, poor carrots beget poor corporate culture. Over to you, Julie.
Woohoo.
Thanks, Tia. Yeah, so you're probably wondering what carrots are, but carrots are a metaphor really for measurement. And if we remember back 2 years ago, there was a Royal Commission in Australia into a few industries: banking, superannuation, and financial advice. And it wasn't a good look. It basically shone a light on those sectors, and it really revealed a lot of bad behaviour. So people were selling products to and charging people for services that they didn't have, selling things to dead people. There was a lot of fallout, and a lot of it was to do with the fact that the corporate cultures were basically very, very poor. And part of the reason for that was that the measures that companies can use sometimes drive the completely wrong behaviour. So poor carrots can produce a poor culture. So that's sort of the topic for today. And hopefully we've learnt a lot from it, but just want to explore that.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
This is awesome. I literally just heard a speech by Simon Sinek, and he was talking about how the Marines are measured. So you've got performance, and then you've got trust. Okay, and like not just trust to do your job, but like trust. Would I trust that guy with my wife in a hotel room? Sort of trust. And they go for really high trust, and then obviously you need to have a certain level of performance. But so many corporate organizations are only good at measuring performance, and they have no ability to measure trust, which you could say is just a good guy. Okay, they have nothing to measure that. And usually those that are just focused on performance and performance alone will leave a wake of everyone. And you can walk in any company and find the highest performing guy there that's only interested in performance by asking one simple question, and it's, who's the asshole in the company? And they'll all go, that guy. And guaranteed he's probably doing really well on metrics that they're being told to measure, but he's probably sapping the life out of that company. And I don't know why you could go out and buy a book, buy a templates, get an expert to come in to teach you how to measure performance, but no one's helping companies measure people.
I think part of that, I think you're 100% right. But, whether you're looking at the Banking Royal Commission, whether you're looking at the Aged Care Royal Commission, whether you're looking at major public company performance, whether you're looking at the politicians in Parliament, ultimately, long-term sustainable value is counterintuitive to the way that our economic systems are created and what is expected of them. When you are getting measured by the stock market in quarterly reports to shareholders, you can't expect people, and you should, but we shouldn't be surprised that people make decisions that are based on making those quarterly numbers look good at the expense of longer-term value, longer-term culture, healthy environments, whether that's internal to the culture of the company or external to the broader world. These two systems do not actually mesh properly together, which is why we're having so many problems.
I agree. I think if you look at, you get your Apple Watch, you get your Garmin, to understand if someone's healthy, there's so many performance metrics, and it's not, is our stock trading high? Have we got this? And so I guess it begs the question of, what does performance mean? And so when it's aligned to the stock market, you can't expect someone to be measured against whether they're good corporate citizens or whether they have, are performing long-term sustainable revenue. So I guess is the question, what do we have the ability to sort of understand what a performance metric looks like, just like health, where there's lots of indicators that come from a different matrix that actually then provides an index score which is different to just the trading on the stock market, where the trading on the stock market is one component of a matrix, which then forms a better picture. That would take a fundamental way of changing thinking to do that. But, you know, to me, it's like when we talk about performance, there's lots of performance coaches, but they teach a tiny sliver of performance. And so what does performance mean? We tend to use these words where they're so ambiguous.
Well, that's my point, that you can find other metrics to sprinkle over what we already have, which will equal long-term performance of the entire organization. Because what happens, eventually they all blow up. Like whether it's a big ass Royal Commission or whether it's a smaller company that has one toxic, high performing sales rep, right, that's just sucking the life out of everyone, eventually you start to lose people and it'll implode because you can't rely off that forever. So I think obviously if someone implements more than just these arbitrary performance metrics and brings in other ones, then naturally it will perform better in the stock market.
That's the thing, though. Whose responsibility is that? Like, whose responsibility is it to develop the influence of that culture and or to create that sort of like the organizational structure around those carrots?
Well, yeah.
But surely it's a shareholder. The shareholder buys what he wants to buy. Now, if he goes out and he sees that the share price is going to go up because of all these good things that are going, and there are ethical people that will buy ethical shares, but we've got to, as a group, we have to make a decision. Am I going to buy into guns? Am I going to buy into cigarettes? Am I going to buy into these things?
I think the problem is slightly more complex than that. And the reason I say that is because as a shareholder, what you are investing in is what the company tells you need to know, or what they decide you need to know. Part of what this is, these internal metrics are about how a company drives behavior inside the tent. And if the behavior being driven inside the tent is toxic, but what is being marketed outside of the tent is nothing but sunshine and unicorns, then people are investing in short-term gain whilst actually creating an environment which is going to be worse for the long run and probably threaten their own investment. And so it's one of those...
So look at a company like AMP. AMP had a toxic environment, and where did their share price go? Down to pennies. To cents, because it had a toxic work environment that people couldn't deal with. The customers in the end didn't want to deal with, and it fell apart. So I get what you're saying, and those things.
I think that's when it wakes up, right? There's a moment where it wakes up. So there is a sort of like in a startup, let's say, where you don't have as many customers, but you're getting to the point where you're externally focused. There's only a certain amount of time when your responsibility lies as a director or anybody else in the company, one of the managers, for example, to create that culture where you reinforce those behaviors. The moment that gets out of hand, it's like, who's to blame now? No one can be blamed. And therefore, that sort of, it spills over into the outside world.
But
so
I think
it spills over out of the tent.
And I agree with what everyone's saying, but unless you get to the top of the aspirational ladder and define what a new desire is for an organization, right, and what makes up that, we can talk all day long about behaviors and internal culture and toxic and people not doing the right thing, and then ultimately their share price drops. But in my view, we have changed behavior on smoking and wearing seatbelts in cars, and it takes time, and it takes a generational change, or sometimes a generational change, to start having people understand that the collective value of why that change is important. And go on.
Can I just say one thing, Finn? Because I think they're really good examples, except for one thing, that those examples, seatbelts and tobacco and so forth, are examples where the value consideration is a negative implication. If I don't wear a seatbelt, I could kill myself or my kids or someone else. If I don't stop smoking, I'm going to get sick. I know that. What we're talking about here actually is the inverse of that consideration. And we're saying, I can get rich even though it may not be good. And so like the challenge I would throw to you when I had this question is, if I gave all of you $1,000 now and we go back in time 15 years and I say to you, you can invest that $1,000 in Facebook right now, right at the front end, and you're all going to become multi-millionaires, hundreds of millions of dollars that $1,000 will be worth. But in doing it, you're going to destroy democracy in 50 countries around the world. Would you make that investment or not?
Depends on the metric and who it is behind the scenes who's
And
actually putting
I
that metric together.
I still do.
I mean, whether we agree or we don't, there are companies out there that do that.
I disagree that it's different because I'm talking, yes, in the past, short-term gains, who cares, right? It's all about how can we manipulate the numbers? What can we present to the people? But I'm talking about a future whereby the cause and effect of running these companies this way is causing the AMPs, is causing this, is causing that. And so it's about a future vision, not a past vision. It's yes, we can still make money by manipulating things and people will do that. But if we can start to change what a company stands for and is it regulated to how much money it can earn? Is it regulated in terms of X, Y? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying it should be, but these are questions whereby it might impose a change because there are lots of cause and effect damage beyond instant shareholder wealth.
Yeah, can I jump in? I'm glad I asked this question, guys. But look, how I see it, right, because I'm a director and I do have responsibility. And what this commission did was just shine a light on financial services. They could have shone a light on lots of different other industries and found really bad behaviour. So because I'm sure it exists, right? But I think that what we have to understand is, as a director, I have a responsibility for profit, sure, if it's a commercial entity, but I also have a responsibility for social, so the customers which I serve and the people that are in that company. And I also have a responsibility for the environmental footprint that that company brings to the planet, okay? Mm-hmm. So if I put it to you, if all directors felt the same, then we wouldn't have a problem, because we wouldn't just be looking at short-term benefits and gains and profit motive. We will be looking at those other factors that are really, really important in our society. So I think it's a bit like a generational shift, that is coming. I mean, there's been investment people that have said, hey, guys, if you don't look beyond short-termism for profitability, people won't invest in you. And that's true. In time, that won't happen. People are looking at what they call ESG, so environmental, social governance. When they look at investments, they won't want to look at a superannuation fund that invests in coal. Banks aren't investing in coal. A lot of the Royal Commission people have fallen on their face.
Where does that decision come from? Regulations need to be there. For example, the SEC, when it came to the blockchain digital ledger technology, took them 8 years to try and figure out what was going on with digital ledger technologies and to recognize that this was actually an investment. And if so, that kind of like the returns on the investment should be taxed. So there is this sort of like movement of technology and innovation, but a lack of the regulatory frameworks and or discussion points.
About the future being a better balance of not just profitability, because, clearly the world is in a shocking place and business need to take their, I don't know, just lead from where their economic environmental footprint is. So you can look at doing well if you just take your eye off profit, because sometimes if you do the right thing environmentally, say, for example, if you had a resource that's just thrown away and you could actually redeploy it into another manufacturing process, that could actually increase your returns.
Yeah.
So it's not all negative.
Julie, can I ask you a question? Because to me, there are two ends of this spectrum, right? When you look at it, and like you, I'm a director of a company. I serve on a public company, and so the fiduciary responsibility is real. Your consideration set is significant and broad. One of the things, though, that I wonder is from a public market perspective, I don't know if the challenge is around if we can do enough to change the behaviour, even to Tia's point around regulators. Because regulators are still there, although I agree they're largely toothless, they're still there as a monitor of an environment that is based upon shareholders. The vast majority of the population do not invest, will not invest, and do not have money to invest. So where that change happens is at the consumer level, at the bottom. And those people are saying, I'm going to stop buying the product because that's the only impact I can have on this company, because I'm not going to buy enough shares to ever make a difference. So to what extent is that cultural shift needed to be coming both top down and bottom up, in your opinion?
Yeah, look, I think that's a fantastic point, Adam. I think it's needed in both directions because customers have fantastic voting power. They just don't buy the products. So do you remember when the plastic bags, were trying to be banned, and then Woolworths kept putting them there, and then some people just went along and they emptied all the plastic onto the floor of the supermarket as a protest that they just didn't want the plastic. So, we can, through our consumption patterns, make a difference.
But what happened there? Like they got rid of them, then they started charging you for the same plastic.
And there's more plastic, harder plastic now that comes in, because most people would use those plastic bags to store them. They didn't change it to recycling. They changed it to something they could make money out of. And now more plastic's actually getting put into waste, which is harder plastic and take longer to degrade. So we
isn't that great for all these companies who basically want to sell more plastic and more fossil fuels?
Yay!
So I bought shares in plastic companies because I knew that the recycling, more bags would be sold.
But that's the funny thing about
recycling. They grabbed it and they turned around and went, let's go and get rid of these plastic bags. So I just bought hard plastic. And I invested in those companies.
How are you going to recycle when you don't know anything about recycling? If I come to this one particular article that has really got my socks in a knot, it's this Guardian article that was shared a couple of years back, and I think it was like 2018. I'm just looking for it right now. I think it's one of the best articles, and I've been literally trying to find this one piece on the actual strategy that a number of these companies have actually taken, which is twofold. The first part of that strategy was to shift the responsibility for litter and waste, I'm reading directly from this, from companies to consumers, rather than blaming the companies that had promoted disposable packaging and made millions along the way. These same companies argued that irresponsible individuals were the real problem. Sorry to spat on about this, but it's really fascinating. Once you move the responsibility away from the government for having the infrastructure for recycling to the corporates that are creating the mess, to consumers who unwittingly, they are the ones, they decided to purchase it, they should be responsible.
Well, the only trouble with that
we've got these companies that make these things up. They turn around and they say, there's obesity comes in. Oh, McDonald's. Oh, yeah, but the bad parenting lets them come in and eat the McDonald's, not the $1 billion worth of advertising that's putting it in and turning it into toys and delivering it to everybody. Every corporation has the ability to mask. I mean, they did that for cigarettes for how long? No, and it's good for you. 9 out of 10 doctors prefer Camels, except I feel sorry for the camel.
Well, here in Port Melbourne, in Victoria and Australia, have announced that they're going to fine people. Their rates are going to go up across the board because people are now putting the wrong things in the recycle bin. Right? Yeah. So they're saying that you're putting a plastic bag because there's a lot more consequence, a lot more cost to put the wrong thing. Yeah. And there is a very basic campaign of just like, well, you're not supposed to do this. But the education process isn't really there. There's nothing on the bin. There's no sticker that says you really shouldn't put this. There's a generic thing. And so it's sort of really interesting that the consequence is being pushed on the consumer, which is great because the consumers are freaking out that their rates are going to go up. So they're learning about something which they've been told probably 50 million times before, but not taking any notice because there's no consequence, So it is having an impact, I think, by putting the onus on the consumer.
Yeah, look, I think the right answer is that consumers need to be better educated, and that's about a marketing campaign that penetrates through so that behaviours change. But also, to your point here, it's also about the corporation because they can look at their supply chain, they can buy ethically in their supply chain, they can redesign and put, better ways of packaging, because packaging is a shocker, real shocker. If you can have it so that it's cardboard or something that just is organic and degenerates when you can put it in your compost, the better.
Any of this packaging, like if I go shopping and if it doesn't have the correct packaging, I'm not buying it. It's as simple as that. Good. I need food.
Well, there you go.
There is much food out there. I've got all the alternatives that I can possibly ask for it's my choice. And I've taken that responsibility. So if it doesn't go into the correct recycling, I'm not going to purchase it because I haven't got time
But
for
it's
it.
also my choice to put a plastic bag around a banana if I want to. You know, that's my choice.
It is.
You know,
It is
I want to
totally
do
your
that.
choice.
What does that taste like?
Really good, actually. Stop me from spoiling my other fruit. No, but the point is, what's the stick and what's the carrot? I mean, that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
The point being that if there isn't a stick and there isn't a carrot, most people keep on doing what's easiest for them. Now, if I turn around and I've got to go, but most people look at the 1 point. They don't look at the 3 or 4 or 5 points of where it's going to get to. They don't look at it as a group to be able to say, okay, well, we're going to say, I've got 5 recycling bins now. Why? Because the councils push these things out, so they get paid to pick up glass, and they've sold the glass component, and they've sold the green waste component, and they've sold the recycling component. And then those recycling component people come along and say, well, hold on, we're not making enough money. Either push it up or we're cancelling. And we had that in Melbourne, where the last company that was picking up all the recycling was just storing it in massive warehouses, and then somebody had to come along. And they knew that it was going to be a big enough problem, that was going to be a big enough headache, that the carrot was they're going to get a whole bunch of cash to fix this, because there was no stick if they didn't deliver on what was going to happen. And you see this all the time in business. And if you incentivize your sales guys to look after, maintain customers, all your new business stops. If you challenge them to get new business, or your maintenance business stops. You see it in a really basic form like that. You've got to look at the entire life cycle of a business, which happens in everything, whether it's a council, whether it's in government, and it comes down to trust. You know, if you've got company, like so many things have been pulled apart because people don't have trust in their council anymore, or their politicians, or their advertising. And it's all
Isn't that convenient though, Matt? Isn't that convenient though, Matt? Create distrust and nobody trusts you, so no one bothers. And like, you know, in a corporate culture, create that distrust in a corporate environment, and no one's going to trust you. It doesn't really matter. You're there for a very short purpose, very short-term thinking, very 9 to 5, and then all of a sudden nobody's going to do anything about it, and no one's responsible, and that's okay. Don't worry about it.
The way that we vote people in is now so incentivized for them to keep on getting re-voted and looking after themselves.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there's no stick, right? They're going to get the carrot.
It's not. You're right, Maddie, and it's exactly what I was just about to say to Tia. You know, exactly what you just said, Tia, and then add the layer on top, which is the same, Maddie, for your political example or the corporate example, where all of these groups regulate themselves. You have bankers regulating bankers, you have politicians regulating politicians, and they wonder why nobody bloody trusts them. Well, you know, how many times have the government and the opposition in this country voted against a federal ICAC? They're going, we don't want anybody independent to judge us. That's the decision they're making. We, as idiotic voters, keep fucking voting for them again and going,
trustworthy. They know what
But there's
really
no
want.
alternative. What's the alternative? What is the alternative?
So
Get rid of the state.
And look, and this is not necessarily for the corporate side, but for the political side. The alternative is that a party should come out and say, our first order of business is installing a federal ICAC. And I reckon they would get a landslide of votes towards them, because it'll be the first time a choice has actually been about accountability. But nobody is going to go and do it. None of the traditional parties will do it, just like none of the traditional businesses will allow themselves to be regulated in any meaningful way. Like even the fine this week, Julie, that came down to the bank. You know, you talk about a $2 billion fine, a $3 billion fine.
It's nothing. Yeah.
It's $56 for a breach. $56 a breach for child sexual trafficking, or, you know, what the hell is going on in the world where this isn't that business should be bankrupt. We should be saying as a society, our values do not stand for this, and we are going to pummel you as a result of that. Not having up on the list for $2 billion, and executives get slightly less, you know, instead of a $20 million bonus this year, they'll get an $8 million bonus this year. Oh, poor bastard.
But there also, Adam, there needs to be a voice in the media continued, because there's so much other information which is supporting a narrative which is around, this $2 billion fine, rather than, hang on a second, let's break this down. Let's show the data. Let's show what this really means, rather than you thinking about this big thing. And so we don't have these, whilst we've got billions of channels, There is no sort of centralized place where people can go to actually have people break this down. This is why I love Corporate Underground, is to be able to flesh out this stuff and at least have a viewpoint, whether it's right or indifferent, to at least be able to sort of bring these things to the fore, because I don't think people actually get to the level of understanding of this stuff. They just see a big number and go, oh, yeah, they're bad guys. But it's like, or it's nothing to them, you know, like these are really important points.
You're right, Finn. And to me, none of these are actually about trust. And Julie, with respect, I don't even think they're about sticks and carrots. I think ultimately what a lot of these things are about is how we as a society, where we place value, right? And so a good example for this week for me has been watching the government decide that they're going to pull another $2 billion out of research, out of university research. That is not an economic decision. That is a values decision. Because, for example, 1.9% of our GDP is spent on defence. Defence in Australia. When was the last time any of us were attacked, right? We spend $19 billion a year on jets and submarines and tanks and weaponry, etc., etc. If you halved our GDP expenditure on defence, you would get billions. Sorry, we spent 38 billion. If you halved it, you'd have 19 billion a year you could put in to say university is free for everybody. Public schools are all well funded. But these are not economic decisions. These are value decisions. The money is there. It's just where we choose to spend it. So it's the same in a business. The opportunity to turn that business around and make it more socially responsible is there. It's a choice that needs to be made, that shareholders and boards need to agree that the greater good is served by this. And yes, you'll earn a little bit less money and the share price won't be quite so high, but the positive impact we'll have on our community will be greater. The problem is there aren't enough businesses making that choice.
They could actually make more money, not less money, by making a fair decision about the environment and social, because then people will invest in them.
Unless there's parameters of which they can operate in, and there's an independent sort of checks and balance people which are making sure that they're working within those frameworks, it'll always be manipulated.
Yeah, but can we? I'd like to loop it back to Julie. Sorry, but like. You said at the start, like I do believe that a company can make more profit and be more productive when it's good. Okay, when it's got a good culture, everyone's moving towards the right goal, and not just environment, but just a good group of people. Now you said at the start that a bad carrot, is bad for culture. So and then that's when I said, well, we're only measuring these arbitrary things which don't always equal good culture. So how then, like, let's try and give, before we run out of time, some practical tips. Like, how do you measure something? Like everyone's running around talking about how to performance manage a team and have a high performing team, but no one's really, and then they say, have a good culture, but you can't just flick a switch. So how do you make sure your company and your people are being measured in a way that those that are the right people stay there and get rewarded, and those that aren't can be performanced out?
Look, I'd say that it's that there's a mixture between financial and non-financial measures, okay? And it will be better if the measures are more directional than absolute. And what I mean by that is, if you have a really hard, fast target, as soon as they get to that target, they'll do something else and their performance will drop off. So I would argue that there needs to be directional measures, that's one thing, and also measures that are around values, because one of the things that a board has to do is set direction, but also agree on what the values are with the executive team and staff, clearly. But it's a two-way street, right? It's bottom up and top down. And if you can get some agreement of values, then you look at, well, what are the examples of behaviour, right? And that is actually intangible. So it's actually quite hard to measure, but you can have a go at it. And if people do, then you actually do develop the right culture. That is my view.
I'm gonna jump in here and talk about Costa Rica. 72 years they've been celebrating with no army. They have no secret. It's as simple as that. The moment that you militarize, the moment that you pick up a weapon, somebody else has to pick up another weapon to protect themselves. There is this entire thing about defending yourself. If somebody has got a weapon, now, if all of us have got nuclear weapons, then, you know, it's inevitable. One of us is going to make a mistake and all going to use that nuclear weapon against one another. So do we need to put our arms down? Like, you know, Adam was saying earlier about that incredible budget that has been put together. I mean, not even that long ago, the UK was spending something close to, you know, I don't know how many millions on, you know, protecting and conserving and whatever else our resources.
Making a magnificent point. And there is an extension to that point as well. If you spend $38 billion a year on arms and armed services, you're not going to invest in that and then not use it. You will find excuses to use it, to optimize it, to make sure it works. Is it as good as it can be? Oh, we had these jets last decade, but they're already obsolete. We need the best jets now. If we needed them in the first place, obviously we need
kill
them
enough
now.
people.
It's a never-ending cycle of lunacy, right? And there are plenty of countries, particularly look at Scandinavia, they have armies. They're not enormous armies. They can defend themselves, maybe not against an alien attack. But at the end of the day, they have made a value choice that investing in education and healthcare and the well-being of their citizens is more important than having million-person standing armies. That is an incredibly enlightened, wise series of decisions that were made, and they are made in countries that have been somewhat removed from hyper-capitalism. They are capitalist countries, absolutely, but they are not hyper-capitalist countries. And I think that's one of the things if we're serious about fixing from a values perspective, how to fix these problems, we cannot ignore the fact that we live in environments that are all about making money at the expense of everything else. And when you are only about making money, then you make decisions that will be poor for the broader community.
I agree, Adam, but I people are looking to those societies now, and they're looking to understand the frameworks around them, because this current system isn't working. If you look at the US, they say, oh, look, the military's so big because it creates so many jobs, yet they won't use the jobs to rebuild the nation. They'll still go out to try and, you know, invade other countries, which is ridiculous. But regardless, I think people are standing up, that people are getting sick and tired, and the US is the biggest amplifier of that, but it does make the values start to shift, where people look to other cultures and ask questions. Well, how come they're doing so good? And I believe that's the catalyst for change, is that people are having, the US is a great place to look at what is starting to fundamentally happen over there. It's like people are sick of it. It's very polarized, but there's a fundamental change going on. And I think that people are looking to other cultures and starting to try and understand how they're doing things. So this conversation, I think, I didn't know that about Costa Rica. So I think that this is I'm always learning, and I think that it's a great thing.
That's all we've got time for this week on Corporate Underground. All about the carrots, the sticks, and nothing in between.